Well, I was living in the United States in 2001 when the Twin Towers event happened in New York. And at that time, I had no, I was in a program in a master degree program in anthropology and looking for subjects to study. And I was open to anything that was happening. So when the Twin Tower episode happened, I suddenly got caught up with that event and with everyone talking about it, and me being living in San Francisco, California at the time was a major event because I was paying attention to everyone, what they were saying about it, what was happening. And then just not even a month later, Afghanistan was invaded. It wasn't invaded by armies, American armies, but it was long time known warlords of Afghanistan that at first were equipped and were helped by the US Army and Pentagon and to invade and to take out the Taliban and to take over many, many regions of Afghanistan. So I started paying attention to that, like why in over only a month after this event, this is the outcome, this is the response. When if they were really after bin Laden, why didn't they just go and get him or kill him, anything? But they had to fund militias that would take over a whole country. So I started questioning myself, why? Why is this the response? And then I started looking into what was happening in Afghanistan and the history of Afghanistan. I knew nothing about it. I knew very little. I knew a little about the Afghan wars of the 1980s against the Soviets that were also helped by American powers, but always through the US government helping them out with bombs and money. And so I knew a little bit because I have been always in my life curious about world history and the history of occupations. So I knew a little bit to know that there's something else that we're missing here. And okay, I started paying attention to it, and I started also paying attention to the whole discourse on terror. And my master degree was on discourses on terror in the US, the academic discourse, the dominant journalistic discourses, and the discourse on the street, because I was taking buses to the university and paying attention to what people were saying in the bus. I was walking the streets and paying attention to what people were saying. And I was going to the university to discuss what had happened in 9/11. So all of that made me pay attention to how discourse operates to legitimate actions that are not really directly linked to those discourses. So the whole discourse on terror was used as a way to put into effect these forms of occupation of Afghanistan that, of course, are very lucrative, are very profitable for some companies. You know, war is about power, but also about money for corporations. It's about, dominating a region that's very important because of Iran, because of many other issues that the US was always interested in. So oil, of course, in Iran and all around, minerals, and it's geopolitics is complex. It's like it's not one thing. So I started paying attention to the history of Afghanistan when I came into contact with the history of many Afghan activists and politicians and what was happening on the ground in those first years. And one of those people that I was paying attention to was Malala Yousafzai. I accompanied as she progressed from being an activist to being voted into parliament. And that made me pay attention to her. And she came to San Francisco to for a book to launch her book, her autobiography. And I went there, and I went because I wanted to buy her book, of course, but I also wanted to meet her in person. And so I stood up in line and waited for my turn to get my book signed. And when my turn came up, I said, "Hi, my name is Rodrigo. I'm from Brazil. I'm here studying anthropology, and I'm also a filmmaker. And I'm really interested in doing a documentary film on Afghanistan. And I really wanted to picture about 5 women activists from Afghanistan. Would you be one of them?" And she's like, "Oh, sure. Here's my email. Let's talk." And we talked for 2 years after that, until 2005 or so, when then I decided to, no, later than 2005, actually. This was actually 2008. So we talked for a long time until 2010 over email. And then when I emailed her and said, my project has changed. I don't want to picture 5 different women. I just want to do a film on you, because through you, everything I have studied on the history of Afghanistan, everything I think people outside of Afghanistan, but also inside of Afghanistan, should be talking about, you talk about, and I can talk about through you. So would you be my main character? And she said, yeah, okay. And I said, okay, I'm going to look for funding and I'll be there soon. And then I went after crowdfunding websites. I went and contacted various organizations. And so through friends and people I didn't know, and through activist organizations, one particular from the United States that they asked me not to say their name, but they helped me fund the film, make it possible, because they were allied to Afghan women already. So they made it, all these people made it possible for me to then go to Afghanistan in 2013. And then there I spent 2 months, most of the time with Malala Yousafzai, going around Afghanistan with her supporters. So she had all this support structure, houses that I could stay in. She stays almost every night in a different house because of security reasons, so people won't find out where she is. Every time I met her, I went through security checks. People checked everything. They turned on my camera to see if it would explode. If they exploded, I would die, and the security people would die too. But that was part of the everyday. Seeing Malala Yousafzai, I was going through security checks, seeing her in different places, different houses, different cities. She surprised me in her own town when she sent me there. And when I arrived after going through Taliban checkpoints and pretending I was a Talib too, that's how we got through. And when I arrived at Farah, her city, she was there and she surprised me there. And that was awesome because I got to know her family. Not everyone. I never got to know her parents. She never showed me her parents as a security precaution. But I met her, many of her relatives, friends. I went to a wedding party. I was stayed at their family house and got to see, and as I show in the film, the orphanage that she opened, the library, and many other things that she did there. The health clinic for women. So I got to check out in person all the activism that she does, and I got to even see, there's a scene in the film where all the elderly leaders of the community in Farah, they go to a meeting with her and to listen to her. So I got to see firsthand how she's respected in her town. And I got to spend a lot of time with her personally, almost 2 months, and see how she really is somebody that puts the people's interests in first place and not her gains, personal gains. Because if she really wanted personal gains, she would be rich, and she would be, living maybe in the United States or in Europe. But she chooses to live in hiding in her own country because she's such a strengthened activist. Yeah, sure. Going around Afghanistan is an experience like no other, because the different regions are so different from each other, both geographically, naturally, the nature, the landscape, the climate, the people, the ethnicities. They are so different. They are also so much in conflict with each other because of their, not because of their differences, but because of how some people, some militias, some warlords of those regions, they worked on those differences to make them uh, to capitalize on them, through war, to make militias through war, and to dominate territories through war. So you have different warlords in different regions dominating because of their different ethnicities that dominate those regions. So Afghanistan is a very complex country, in the sense of so many different kinds of places and histories, and it's not so huge as a country. It's not huge, but the different regions have their own different identities, and it's a shame. It's an unfortunate thing that they have warlords that capitalize on those differences of territory and ethnicity in order to make power and profit over it. And but it's one of the countries that I most felt well received. The most hospitable country I've ever been in, because people, whatever house you're in, if you're not an enemy, of course, if you're not considered an enemy today, like if you're not American or if you're not from another ethnicity that they might consider in that region to be enemy, you're treated as a king. They give you the best food, the best everything. Sometimes I was given all the best food that a house had, and they had no fridge. And I would say, please stop giving me food, because I'm not going to eat all of this. And you're going to put it all away because you have no fridge here. You have no way to keep this food you're making for the next day. And they're like, no, but this is our way. If we don't do this way, it's not our way. So it's an interesting country, because the most hospitable country in a sense of well receiving guests can also be the country where, if you're the enemy, you're treated as you're going to be killed. You better not show up as an enemy, because they'll get together And there was one instance that we had to run for our lives because people at first we were with Malalai. It's the first scene of the film. Malala is talking at a cemetery, and at first people seem friendly, and there are some supporters that know her there that supported her. But there were other people that were like, who is this woman to talk to us, men, about politics and war? Who does she think she is? She's from another ethnicity. She's Pashtun. They recognize her as being radically different because of her ethnicity, and because of that, and because of being a woman, because of not covering herself and everything, talking as a man, ta ta ta. These guys were getting together to kill us, and some of her supporters, they came to us and said, "Okay, you guys better run now. Run to the car. Just get away from here now, and be careful because they might be putting mines on the road while you're driving down the road. So be careful." And this was like one of the times where me and my Afghan assistant director, we were like, okay, what do we talk about when we're about to die? Because we were like, we don't know if we're gonna die now, and it's a dangerous place. It's a very, very dangerous place. And Malala is so courageous. Like she's incredible. Just living there and sometimes going to these meetings and places and putting herself out there. Yeah, there was this instance where we traveled from Herat to Farah. Farah is Malala Yousafzai's city, and there are almost no ways to make this journey without being through a car. So we had to get on a car, get on a road for like 5 hours. I remember, if I can recall. And for those 5 hours, we were all very nervous because there were checkpoints from many different militias on the road, and they stopped us a lot. I had a really long hair as I have now. I had really long beard, so I looked like a Talib, part of the Taliban. We were stopped in Kabul all the time, and I had to give papers, and people asked if I was a Talib because my beard was so huge. And during these checkpoints, I just faked that I was sleeping, and all the other boys and girls in the car, they were saying that I was their uncle and that I was sick, so they wouldn't want to wake me up. So all the time I was just faking to be asleep, and I was their uncle and just sleeping. So we passed the checkpoints, and but this was a dangerous moment because there were Taliban checkpoints, and the Taliban never stopped controlling parts of the territory while I was there. In those years of 2013, they were controlling Kandahar still, and Kandahar is not so far away from Farah, and they were around Farah, so they were still around, and until today they are around. They are dominating many places in Afghanistan until today. Well, I think people should learn more about the history of Afghanistan and what's going on there right now, because what's going on there right now is the United States' longest war. It's longer than the Vietnam War. It's costing still many lives a day. It's making people poor. People don't have any security, jobs. Uh, the country is still devastated. So all those discourses of reconstruction, of women's rights, tarara, they are all bullshit, because there's no real democracy in Afghanistan. It's still controlled by fundamentalists and militias primarily, so warlords. It's all about drug money and war money. It's all about controlling territory and making money over construction business, over stolen territory. It's making money over government money as well, which is people's money. So it's militias using public money for private interests. It's militias and mafias and just thieves running the country. That's not very different from Brazil, from many other countries, you know. We also have a militiaman president of Brazil right now. So we have this going on all over the world. Militias using the state for private interests. But the problem is that Afghanistan is so close to being a catalyst for larger wars as well. It's not only about Afghanistan, it never was. Afghanistan has resisted domination and occupation from many places. But in that, it has also prevented major wars from happening, like a war with Iran, you know. And one of the big issues is that Afghanistan could become a space for a major war to break out that takes Iran in, that takes, you know, Russia in, China in. So in that, I'm talking about the larger geopolitical reality that Afghanistan is where, as my film shows, many superpowers of the world come to fight each other, but they forget that over there are also interests, there are also warlords and militias, and that if they are forgotten there, if they are left just fighting on their own there, they will look for their own partners, and their own partners could be people that are not so nice, like Bin Laden, like maybe another crazy person from countries around, like ISIS, you know, like the Islamic State. Afghanistan before 9/11 had never had any problem with suicide terrorism. After 9/11, we have the first case of suicide terrorism that kills one of the major leaders of Afghan militias. So Massoud was the first to be killed in Afghanistan by a suicide bomb. And this was after 9/11 and just before the US occupation. This is something that is not very talked about, but it's very weird to see that, you know, either somebody was preparing the way for an occupation that didn't want Massoud to be part of, or because they expected an occupation, somebody wanted him dead, wanted Massoud dead, so they could dominate Afghanistan. And so we have 9/11, the first suicide bombing kills Massoud, and then we have the occupation. And after the occupation, you have a rising number of suicide bombings in Afghanistan. Now, so you have a war on terror that comes to make terror present in Afghanistan. So now you have a country that is where it's common to have suicide terrorism and to have terrorism of all kinds. Whereas before the occupation, you had just one. And before 9/11, you never had a suicide bombing happen in Afghanistan. All this is very interesting to look at. So geopolitics plays a major role in Afghanistan, but also leaving Afghanistan to be a poor country as it is, to not support democratically minded people and activists like Malala Joya, like Rawa, like so many women, so many other men as well, that do so much important work, that have almost no support on the ground in Afghanistan to help people out. The government also has failed to provide adequate education, healthcare, and basic legal rights to people. So you have what's called by some a failed state, but it's an intentionally failed state. So militias can still flourish, and also because profit of war is still happening. So the war is still going on. You still have many Americans and other people making a lot of money on this war. And this is what makes it just show itself for what it is. It's not about democracy, human rights, women's rights, as Malala Joya says. It's other things that are being worked for in Afghanistan by the major powers, which is always, money, power, and etc. So this was a doctor of the largest children's hospital of Afghanistan in Kabul that knew about us doing the film through Malala Joya supporters and said, please bring them here, and I won't tell them what it is I'm going to talk about, but once they are here, I'll talk what I have to talk about. And then he did it, and the way we had to do it was through telling another story in the hospital, that we were interested in showing how the hospital was working well, blah blah blah, doing a positive image of the hospital. That's how the director of the hospital let us in. And then we went to that doctor, and he just said what he had to say. He really wanted to say that he saw a major quantitative leap and augmentation in the number of those casualties of birth defects, of all those kinds of anomalies that are linked to uranium, to phosphorus, to all those chemical weapons that have been studied in other places like Iraq, for example, where it was proven in Iraq that this was done, and that in Iraq we have scientists that went there and showed that there was white phosphorus and other chemical weapons used, and that it generated birth defects and other problems in Iraq. In Afghanistan, we didn't have these studies. I don't know if recently these have been done. They could be, but I didn't. I went after these studies. There were no studies. The doctor told me, they won't let people do these studies here. The United States, of course, has no interest that scientists will do these studies if it is to prove that they were using chemical or other weapons. But that scene stays in the film as a testimony of a doctor. It's not us telling the doctor what to say. He called us to say what he had to say. For now, the film is available only for Afghans or Persian-speaking people. So it's on the film's Facebook page. In the Name of My People is the title of the film. So if you go to the Facebook page, we have a publication there where the film is available online, even for download, but it's the subtitled version for Persian speaking people. So it's for Afghans and maybe Iranians and other people that understand Persian. For others, we have not yet made available except for festivals because of Brazilian bureaucracy. We have a terrible bureaucracy here that makes us have to show the film for TV or movie theaters first before we make it available online. Even making it available online for Persian speaking people was a great struggle for me because I had to go against many people that here in Brazil, the company that produced it with me didn't want me to do it. And I had to confront them and say, it's taking too long. And then the pandemic came. We were about to show it in movie theaters here. The pandemic came. It wasn't that we weren't able to show it in movie theaters here. So we have to see if we're going to TV now. And it's a hard thing because, as you know, the film is highly, highly problematic politically. It takes a stance. It takes the side of Malala Yousafzai. It has, you know, these claims like this one on chemical weapons and on political intervention. It calls occupation by invasion, occupation, and so it's highly polemic. It's highly difficult for people to take it lightly and say, "Oh yeah, let me show it on my channel." You know, we don't know yet which cable channel or TV channel will want to show it. We had festivals showing it in the United States, and that's all. That's all for now. So, and then besides that, I just made it available to Afghans. I really wanted it available, so it's available for them to watch and download. Yeah. This part is something. It's something that I really wanted to do. Is just know the country, go around, talk to people, and like Malala Yousafzai wanted, talk to the victims of these wars. This is what the film is about. It's the voices of the victims of these 40 plus years of wars. So this is what the film is about, is listening to these people that are caught in between militias and other militias and outside governments and empires fighting each other. And you have people in there just like, okay, maybe I need to defend myself here, so I'm going to pick up arms. And other people, okay, I'm not going to pick up arms, but they're killing my brother. What do I do now? You know, it's a crazy, crazy thing to think that this country has been going through 40 plus years of wars. And the world is just letting it happen. That's the crazy thing that I want people to take out of the film, is how crazy it is to for the world just to be watching a country go through 40 plus years of different wars and just let it happen.